All right, my food mood friends, welcome back. I had a really awesome conversation with my partner last night, and I want to share with you both the conversation that we had and also the lesson behind why I shared my part of the conversation that I shared. I am going to run this video by him first to make sure I have his consent because it is a little bit intimate. We, as parents, are doing the best that we can. I truly believe that like every parent is doing the best that we can. And there has been some psychological work that I've done in my past that I'm really wanting to give my little one so that she doesn't have to go through some of the same healing. And, you know, a lot of how I think about it is like reprogramming our beliefs. So last night we had this we have a lot going on in our life right now. We're moving in a couple weeks. We have a lot of uncertainty. We have a lot of like ungroundedness. And, you know, now more than ever, it's easier to be not patient and to say, you know, to lose our cool and to be rough and use power. And so, you know, spent all day in the bathroom yesterday, sealing the shower and reinstalling our toilet in our Airstream. We have like, you know, we're preparing to sell it. And so we're really like working on like getting it all tuned up and fine tuned. And it was a long day and it was 100 degrees. My partner and I both were sweating. We worked all day while our little one was at school, and it's easy to not be patient. It's really easy. And my partner, he very often, like when our little one isn't doing something, like when she's about to make a mess or when she's, you know, not doing something totally right, or, you know, something that's easier for us as parents to have less of a mess, or you get the idea. So his kind of go-to comment is like, "What are you doing?"
Welcome! Here is your hostess and coach, Chandra, helping people make food and mood changes doable without missing out. Go ahead, high five that like button, subscribe and share while you're there.
And it has this like tone to it, like, what's wrong with you? And so this is the topic of the video today is this default brain thought of what's wrong with you. And I shared with him, it's been like an ongoing thing back and forth between us of like parenting styles, and, you know, we both love her, and like every parent, we're doing our best. And oftentimes like I'm a little bit sensitive about how he talks to her, and at the same time, like I also, and how I started the conversation with him last night was saying, well, how I started the constructive part of the conversation, because we had a not very constructive part first, which I definitely will take responsibility for. But the tone in which he says this has this kind of like, you're doing something wrong. And so he's like, but I really believe that boundaries are important. And I said, 100%, boundaries are really important. What I want to work on and become better parents at is delivering the boundaries, is helping her understand what the boundaries are. I don't even remember what she was doing last night. She's really been into playing with water. So maybe she was playing with water, and in our Airstream, it's like not the best thing to play with water and have water going everywhere. So we're kind of constantly like trying to protect the Airstream, but also, you know, she's a little kid. She wants to play, she wants to explore, she wants to learn. So, you know, he's like, well, I feel like she's spoiled and that she gets to just do whatever she wants. And I said, and he's like, I believe boundaries are really important. I said, I totally agree. Boundaries are really important. I said, but I just want to work on the delivery of how we share with her the boundaries. And then I shared my childhood about how I, like most of us, grew up with this right and wrong mindset, that there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And I can be a good girl or a bad girl. And this emotional punishment of like, you're doing that wrong. And the energy and the belief system that sets up in our brain is really limiting. Like all kids, all humans, one of our innate desires is to be approved. It's like part of how we survive. So we'll all want to be approved of, we all want approval. But so this like wrong, if we're doing something wrong, we're naturally wanting to correct. And we're also naturally wanting to please. But our primal brain has this default of like, what's wrong? And it's a survival instinct, and it's powerful, like using fear and using shame and using these heavy emotions. They are a way to control a kid's behavior or to influence even, a big person's behavior by giving them this negative, heavy emotion. What's wrong with you? And it's also like what happens in our own brain, like what's wrong with me? What's going wrong here? So it's kind of this default thought belief that happens in many of our heads, happens in our parents and the way they think about themselves and the way they've raised us and our culture, and our primal brain just has this kind of default of like, what's wrong with you? And one of the most powerful parts that I help my clients through is loosening this belief of like, well, what if there isn't a wrong way to do it? What if I'm not wrong in the way that I'm doing it? Like, so many of us get hung up on, well, I want to do it right. And so we don't actually do it because we're not sure how to do it right. But actually messing up and exploring and doing it wrong is like really a big part of the empowering process to figure life out and to take risks and to do awesome things. And so I shared with him, I said, I know that, like, I've been thinking a lot about your childhood and how you were raised. And he was raised in the USSR, which has really strong, even stronger than Western culture, belief systems of right or wrong, and extremely strongly reinforced. And I watched his parents with our little one, and I watched how much they were speaking in that language, and they love her with everything, and that's how they were talking to her, is in this kind of right or wrong. And I'm watching him do it, and I shared with him, I said, I also grew up with this mindset, and I really did a lot of work in my 20s to loosen this belief and this like default thought of what's wrong with you or what's wrong with me, to wondering more of like,
hello, my friend. How are you? I'm in the Dead Sea, floating in the water. Go ahead and like and share and follow so we can keep in touch.
It's like taking out the black or white, the right or wrong, and looking at it from a more neutral thing and saying, okay, well, what are the effects of this decision? So like if you're playing with water, to our little one, Calista is her name. If you're playing with water, then it's going to spill over here and it's going to get the wood wet and there's going to be marks and there's going to be water damage. So like helping her understand the consequences of playing with water in the airstream versus like, what are you doing? Like you're doing something wrong. And then she goes into this like fight or flight, and she always comes crying to me because the energy is so intense for her to have this like intense emotion. And so I said boundaries are super important. Let's just enforce them with like this curiosity and this teaching. Because and I shared with him, I said, I really get your childhood, and I really get how like this is really ingrained in you. And I also share with him, this is what I like, a lot of the work that I do with my clients. And, I would really love you to join me in like trying to not pass this down to our little one, this right or wrong, what are you doing wrong, belief system, thought process, thought loop. And, with my clients, it's like, when we are in thinking that something's a problem, we go into stress mode, and we actually don't use the higher level thinking part of our brain. We go into survival mode, and we use our primal brain, and we only think about right now. So we think about, how do I get out of this discomfort? How do I get out of this shame? How do I get out of this moment as quick as possible? Versus if we're using the learning part of our brain, like the parent part or the CEO part, the prefrontal cortex, then we're able to, and a lot of this, and switching to this brain is like loosening that thought of like, what if nothing's gone wrong here? What if this catastrophe? What if this water mess? What if this someone not showing up to work? What if this flat tire? Whatever it is that happens in our life where our brain defaults to what's wrong, what's going wrong, what's the problem? When we're in this thinking, we actually can't solve problems. We just solve the moment, and we don't actually zoom out and think about how can I solve this in a productive way? And so switching this default thought, which was like looking at it, questioning it, noticing it, catching it, and on purpose talking back to our brain and coming more from a place both with ourself internally, to our own brains, to my partner's brain, and also to our little one, and also to employees or whoever you're working with, from the place of like, well, maybe nothing's gone wrong here. Now, what's the solution here? How do we figure this out? How do we learn from this situation? It's such a different operating system, and it changes the way that we show up. It changes the way we connect. It changes the way we solve problems. It really makes a big difference. It changes the way we feel. Instead of feeling like there's something wrong with us and that we're bad all the time, we're more in like a neutral, curious, what do I want to do? How do I want to figure this out? What What if there's no wrong way? What if there's no right way? What if there's just my way and I want to figure it out and I want to see which consequences this has and which consequences this has? It's such a freeing and higher level thinking place to function from. So I would really encourage you to catch that thought. What's wrong? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with this situation? And just question that that's just a thought, and notice the effects that it has on your operating system, on the way that your brain performs, and on the way that you connect with people. Loosening this belief, loosening this thought is a game changer. So that's what I got for you today. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you soon.